So in today's blog, I want to talk about injury prevention for shoulders. Okay, and I see a lot of slap tears that are being labeled as contact injuries that aren't preventable. Okay, contact injuries, to me anyway, are the skill, okay, isn't good enough, the tackle technique isn't good enough, which potentially could be prevented, okay, or that there's an issue somewhere else in the body that led to this contact injury where the stress exceeded the tissue's capacity, okay, which ultimately leads to a slap tear or a shoulder dislocation, okay. One example in rugby, okay, is the outstretched hand, okay. So as the athlete comes forward, either they might plant their foot and then they'll go to make a tackle, and eventually then, okay, obviously the shoulder will go back into the apprehension position, and which we all know will stress the anterior capsule and eventually result in either a bang cart, a slap tear, or whatever else. You know, if there's enough stress, it could even result in a dislocation. Now, what I see a lot of is athletes that actually don't have the range of movement through the thoracic spine or through their hip here. So if the hip can't externally rotate, okay, or if the femur can't externally rotate, the thoracic spine doesn't have the motion for whatever reason, okay, all of a sudden that shoulder is going to be in end range very, very quickly. Okay, so I can put my hand here, okay, I'm nowhere near end range, okay, with external rotation, but I can get more range of movement through my hip and through my thoracic spine, okay, in this position, and it's the exact same as my shoulder being in this position, okay, so I haven't moved it. If I don't have the range here and here as the player has gone past me, then I have to make it up somewhere else. The brain's very smart, it'll find a way to get the job done. So if I can't do that, then all I'm going to do is do that, okay? So all of a sudden I'm in end range because the hip and the thoracic spine doesn't help, and all of a sudden I'm in that apprehension position and the shoulder is at end range, okay? The tissue's capacity is exceeded, and eventually injuries happen, okay? So it's a very, very important one to know that actually we can be preventing a lot of shoulder contact injuries by getting the shoulder working with the hip, working with the thoracic spine in unison, okay? So that disconnecting the nervous system between the three joints is very, very serious for rugby players, especially returning from injuries where they've gone into the position again, okay, they're doing loads and loads of cuff work here, whereas actually have they learned to integrate the hip working with the thoracic spine, working with the shoulder, okay? So the shoulder finishes the movement, or to take one step further, forces go through it over to the wrist, okay? Or is it initiating the movement, okay? So is the hip and the foot driving the motion, the shoulder's finishing it, or is all the motion being initiated from the shoulder, okay? So in this day and age, I think it's very old-fashioned for physios just to be working the range that the injury happened, okay, in isolation. We have to ask, why did that shoulder end up in that position first? Okay, it wasn't because the rotator cuff wasn't strong enough, which very often it was absolutely fine. It's just that the force went through it exceeded its capacity, okay, and you know, no matter what, if there's a certain force goes into it, it's going to break, okay? That's just logical. So we need to think in terms of the whole body, the hip and the thoracic spine, helping the shoulder to prevent injuries, and also when we rehab them as well. Okay, so don't just think in terms of isolation injuries, strengthening the area that the injury happens, because sometimes the shoulder has no business being in that position, okay, that it should be the thoracic spine and the hip taking the shoulder along for the ride instead of the shoulder going with the person on its own.